We're going to venture into Proverbs, and I've been praying about it, studying, and kind of thinking about it, and I think this will be a good direction. You know how timing always is, but if it works out the way I'm thinking, we'll probably be done with Proverbs the Sunday before Easter. And then we can do kind of an Easter focus, and then we'll jump into April with something else. But if it goes the way I'm thinking it might, I think that's about the timing that we'll take going through the book of Proverbs. But as we look at the book of Proverbs, it is, what do y'all think about it? I mean, initial ideas, thoughts, when you hear the book of Proverbs, what do you think?
Repetition.
Repetition, okay.
A lot of wisdom.
A lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
But it doesn't flow. That's my
Res-
problem.
Not super
Doesn't-
direct, yeah, start to finish kind of thing. And there's a reason for that. But it is about wisdom is really the primary focus of the entire, what we call the book of Proverbs. It's actually a collection of a bunch of different writings, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So it wasn't a start to finish. I sat down and wrote from here to there. And some of these Solomon didn't even write, but he compiled them. So it's just a kind of a mixed match collection of things that are put together. That's why you do have some repetition, and that's why there doesn't seem to be a lot of flow sometimes from one chapter to the next. It's almost more like a compilation of just writings that, kind of like the Bible, that they put together at a certain point and said, this is the book of Proverbs, kind of thing. But wisdom is the overall idea, the overall concept. I was kind of thinking about this book. There's a big difference in wisdom and information. With access to the internet these days, the last 30, 40 years or so, we live in a time of human history like never before. I mean, we have access to more information and more knowledge and possibly wisdom, as they may call it, out there than ever. Yet we seem to be more discombobulated than ever before. I don't think we're being very wise with the information, is kind of the idea. And that's, I think, where Solomon was coming from. I mean, he was deemed as the most wise person ever, but he made a lot of dumb decisions. You know, when you have 300 wives and 700 girlfriends, that's not very smart.
You
Not
stay
sure.
in trouble.
You stay in trouble all the time. So it's what we do with the information. I think that's important. So I always try to separate that out. Being wise doesn't necessarily just mean being smart or having a lot of information. We currently, got a few notes here, we currently have a universe of information literally at our fingertips that we can retrieve in nanoseconds. We now have an alternate source of information called artificial intelligence that will not only tell us the answers, but think for us and give us answers. Explaining things to us in some cases just surpasses our ability to understand what's going on anyway. I mean, it's to that level already. Has anyone ever played around with Ch1 before?
Very well.
Very little. So if you've never seen it, heard of it, I'm going to take a minute and we're going to look at it. So most people know how to use Google, right? So Google is just a search engine. Ch1 is a search engine, but it also is an artificial intelligence platform. Okay? So if I were to go into this, and you have to create an account, which I have to use this, but if you go into this, you're simply greeted with this page, and it says, you know, how can I help you today? So let's think of a real basic question. What's the question we can ask it?
When is daylight savings time?
Okay, when is, I can type, daylight savings time? I'll just put that.
You need in North America.
And there it's responding. Daylight savings time typically begins the second Sunday of March and ends on the first Sunday of November in the United States. However, it's important to note that not all countries or regions observe daylight savings time. Starts and end dates may vary. So that's kind of a direct, this is what it is. Let's think of a more complicated question.
So what we did was had to do a presentation
Okay?
and did a generic one, and then we said add keywords to make it more professional. Like it would do it, and then you say make it more professional, and then it'd do it again.
Wow.
It's amazing.
It is pretty amazing. I want to throw one that most humans can't understand. Let's see if it comes up with this. Explain the concept of the Trinity.
Yeah, let's blow its mind.
And there it goes.
Oh, boy.
And this is not just a search engine result. This is it thinking on its own. It just now came up with this answer. This is not pre-programmed anything. Concept of the Trinity is a theological doctrine within Christianity. Attempts to articulate the nature of God as a triune being consisting of three distinct persons in one essence. The Trinity is called the foundational doctrine for many Christian denominations, including Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, mainstream Protestant. Exact understanding and emphasis of the Trinity can vary from different Christian traditions. And then it goes and kind of gives you, a pretty good amount of information there.
And they didn't even list us Baptists.
It didn't list us Baptists, exactly.
No, we're Protestant.
Yeah, I guess we're the Protestant. But that's pretty impressive. And as Greg said, there's some things you can go in here and get it to
And it doesn't
do.
try to say, but that's not logical, or,
It doesn't, it typically, well, on some things I found it is biased, but typically it tries to stay pretty neutral. I did a couple of runs through with it. Lost my picture. And asked it, who is Joe Biden? And it listed who he was and all the great and wonderful things that he's done since he's been in office. And I said, who's Donald Trump? He listed him as the president of the United States and all the terrible things that he did while he was in office.
so nothing.
You
So
know
there's
what?
a little bit of a bias there.
It's predominantly gets its information from New York Times.
New
New York Times
okay.
is suing Microsoft because it uses so much of its knowledge base
Wow.
information because of it, and they're trying to sell. So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
so there is a,
So you gotta watch it a little bit. But for the most part, it's pretty spot on. Everything I've ever searched biblically, it seems to really come back with a good answer, a decent answer.
I said New York Times, that's not right. It's one of those
Right, gotcha.
papers.
What is the name, chat, what?
Chatgpt.com is the name of the website. It is free. Yeah, there's a paid version of it, but it's free right
I've
now.
seen that, but I had no idea.
Yeah, but that's what it is.
What I was talking about was the paid version,
Okay, the paid version.
when you
Gotcha.
can make it more professional presentations.
Okay.
Do it resume.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
It'll come up with stuff that's blows your mind.
Who came out with that?
Microsoft.
It was
No,
Microsoft.
Microsoft bought the company.
Do
I
what?
think it was OpenAI.
OpenAI is the original group.
But
Yeah.
Microsoft owns 50% or 49% of the
Okay.
company.
Controlling interest.
You
Right.
think maybe they tracked you?
Probably.
And you think maybe
Oh,
they...
that's
Everything I've ever typed in is kept in a history. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know that they.
So they know if you're looking about Christian questions about Christianity.
Oh, I'm sure.
Or Bible-related questions, or if you're...
Or if you got in there and say, how to commit a crime and I get caught, there are probably people, red flags are going up everywhere and they'll be really watching you pretty closely. But even within artificial intelligence, and there's a way deeper things that we can look at, there's a system developed by Google. There's this old game, it's a 4,000-year-old game called Go. It's like a crazy version of checkers, basically. It's like a version of checkers and chess that was played in China and Japan for centuries, millennia. And it's just a time-honored tradition in that culture. Well, Google came up with an algorithm. What was it called, remember? It's called Amazon, I don't know, I forget now. Anyway, they came up with this AI system to play against the world's best Go players. And they're like, oh, this, computers will never be able to outthink someone who's been studying this their whole life and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the first game, the human won, and then he got destroyed the next 4 games in a row. And it just totally wiped him out.
Watson and chess.
Yeah, Watson on Jeopardy and all that sort of stuff. And then they came out with a more advanced version that beat that first version 100 games to 0. And the way it beat them is it came up with moves that no humans had ever thought about. And there's things that they're finding where AI is, it is rising above our ability to control it, our ability to understand it. There's a story that happened, I think it was over last summer, where they were training an AI weapons system to shoot things out of the sky based on certain criteria that they had taught it. And it was, shooting them out of the sky. If something come by, it would distinguish it from something else, and it would shoot what it's supposed to out of the sky. Well, they were giving it a scoring system. So every time it did what it was supposed to do, it ranked points within this game or whatever that they had programmed it in to do. So then they're like, okay, let's take it to the next level and let's see if we can make this be obedient to its commands to violate what it's been programmed to do. So they then began to tell it, don't shoot down the things that you get points for. And it literally turned around and shot the operator that was telling it, killed the operator that was telling it not to do what it was programmed to do. And then there were signals coming to the robot, or whatever it was, the drone, in the AI system saying, bad robot, don't shoot your operator. And then it began to shoot down the communication towers that those messages were coming in on, so it didn't have to listen to that. That was last summer. I mean, so this stuff is already getting out of
You know how
hand.
scary that is?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
You've seen the movie War Games.
Oh yeah, I mean, and movie, the Terminator. I mean, stuff for years and decades they predicted this is probably how this is going to go. Maybe AI's watching all these movies, and that's why it's doing it. I don't know, but as impressive as it is, it's obviously got its flaws. And again, there's a huge difference in just information and knowledge versus knowing what to do with it and how to apply it in a certain way. But it is quite amazing that what used to take about $1,000 and 2 or 3 bookshelves of the encyclopedias that we used to buy is now free with a Wi-Fi connection on a device, and we can access it very quickly. Just type in a few keywords, ask an AI system something, and it'll give it to you. Yeah, I've done just experimentally write me a 5-point sermon on the Antichrist, and it does it.
Yeah, it'll do it.
It's insane, and it gets it. I mean, pretty accurate. I did one. I was watching a video on a guy that did one like that, and it actually mentioned Neuralink as most likely a mechanism the Antichrist will use as the mark of the beast, and your ability to be controlled by the Antichrist through AI systems, and like it's claiming that it will be itself part of the Antichrist process of taking over the world.
maybe the Antichrist won't even be human.
That's what some people are kind of actually wondering is, will AI be the Antichrist?
Thank God for God.
That's right, amen. So we'll see how that pans out. But there is a huge difference in having access to this type of thing and having wisdom with what to do with the information that we have in front of us. And kids are struggling with what to do with the information that's in front of them. They stare at TikTok, they see all this LGBT stuff, and they think, oh, well, that's normal now. So now I'm going to be that kind of person. And you see the suicide rates, and you see the drug. We've seen it throughout the decades, different phases of this. But these screens and this AI stuff is just taking it to a whole nother level. So teaching people, I think it goes, and we'll see this in the first few verses, from the kids to the parents to the grandparents to the great-grandparents. It's going to take us all to use spiritual discernment with how to approach and handle and deal with this kind of stuff so that we're producing wisdom out of every situation, out of every generation, so that people aren't just going to continue to go in a bad direction with all of this. when we look at the word proverb, most of the Old Testament books especially, they got their name from the first few words of the first line of the book. And this starts off saying, the Proverbs of Solomon. Therefore, it got the name Proverbs. So, what is a proverb? Anybody got a clue on what proverb means?
I mean, just like a point of knowledge.
A point of knowledge. You know, we have Chinese proverbs, we have biblical proverbs, we have all kinds of proverbs. So the word proverb literally means a comparison. That's what it literally means, it's comparing something, such as the righteous versus the wicked, you know, the smart decisions versus the bad decisions. It's comparing things from what usually is happening versus what should be happening is kind of the overall gist of what's going on. The term Proverbs eventually simply became to mean any piece of wisdom. It goes beyond knowledge, is kind of my point with all this. It goes beyond just information, beyond knowing things, and implementing these things in a way that's wise and honorable, of course, to God. Kind of any basic rule of conduct based on observation of life. You look at a situation and you make a wise decision. That's the essence of what Proverbs is trying to teach us how to do. Now, Solomon is believed to be the writer. His name is mentioned right out of the gate. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. There are 3 sections, however, that it is not believed that he wrote. He compiled, most likely. But he probably didn't pen them down himself. And that's Proverbs 22, 24, and 30 and 31. Those 3 sections, chapter 22, chapter 24, chapters 30 and 31. It's likely he did not originate that information as far as penning it down. Of course, we know God's the originator of it all. But he probably didn't pen those down, but he compiled the information. But it's generally accepted that Solomon himself did not write those specific pieces. When you look at Solomon, Solomon reigned as king of Israel from 971 BC to 932 BC. So he was back there about 1,000 years before Christ. And most scholars agree that he most likely wrote the Proverbs kind of here and there early in his reign. Because as we know, the story of Solomon, he got progressively a little farther away from God as his life went on. So it's believed and accepted that these were written early on when he was closest to God and when God was able to use him before his heart kind of began to be drawn away from the Lord.
Did he ever come back?
I don't think fully. I mean, I hadn't studied his life out in a while in detail, but I don't know that. It's kind of like David, you know. I mean, he made, you know, his issues and mistakes, and while he was a man after God's own heart, he did repent and he came back.
Right, I remember.
But as far as the full impact, you know, of what it was like before, you know, I don't know that it ever got back to quite that level. It does appear, based on history, that, and even within Scripture, what it tells us about it, that the actual book of Proverbs as a whole was most likely compiled about 250 years later, after Solomon had died. That these writings were just out there, and later on, when we get into the 25th chapter, it says that there were also, these also were the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. So it just tells us directly within chapter 25 that these things being read were compiled by a group of people much later than when Solomon lived. So Solomon wrote them, probably had them in a library or something somewhere, I don't know. But they were compiled into a book much later. So again, the book is all about wisdom that should be interwoven into every facet of our lives on many different levels. the overall kind of idea here is that to be a wise Christian, what do we think about that? If you say someone is a wise Christian, what characteristics would they have?
Godly.
Do what?
Godly.
Godly, okay.
They wouldn't fall into idle gossip or
Okay, and
stirring the church up.
kind of staying up above the chaos and the immaturity. Okay.
Checking with God before they open their mouth.
Right, good
Prayer
godly
warriors.
counsel, prayer warriors, absolutely.
First down, the fear of the Lord.
The fear of the Lord, being in, and that goes way beyond reverence, but that is typically the definition of that. But the kind of idea is, some people have described it as skillful living, being skilled in how you approach any situation without quick reactions, without blurting out something first, before seeking counsel, before prayer, not jumping the gun on things. To be a wise person or a wise Christian means that you really take the time to do things the way they're supposed to be done. And that's only going to be accomplished through wisdom. So let's look at and see what the text tells us as we kind of move into this. So again, verse 1 says, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. And here he goes in and tells us the meaning. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. We're lacking a lot of that in this day and time. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice and judgment and equity. So that word equity, what do you think that means? Because that means something different today than it used to.
Well, is there a way of like treating all people the same?
Basic.
Not having favoritism.
Right, it's basically fairness. It's giving, now, there's two terms floating around today, and I get them confused half the time. There's equality and equity. This term equity means everyone has the same access to God and to information. You have the same access to it. But what you do with it is up to you. Arnold Schwarzenegger puts it this way. He said, he was in an interview recently and talking about how he wished he could run for president because he's got a lot of things that he feels that he could contribute that the other candidates don't. And but they won't allow him to because he was not born in America.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, but he even used Arnold Schwarzenegger's known for what? Bodybuilding, right? He's the muscle guy, the pinnacle of exercise and all that. Even today, he still uses those basic lessons he learned in the gym to get his points across. And he said, to me, he said the gym is a great equalizer. 200 pounds on a weight bar is the same to someone who has $2 in their pocket or 200 million in their bank. It doesn't care who you are, how much you know, what kind of car you drive or what kind of politics you are. That 200 pounds is 200 pounds. And there's no getting around it. It's equal to everybody. And the people who are able to handle that 200 pounds have conditioned themselves to be able to do so. And the people who have not simply can't handle it. I thought that was a pretty good point. And that's kind of what equity is here. The wisdom is out there. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He will never change. And if we're going to get on whatever level we need to be on with Him, it's going to be up to us. We have equal opportunity in all fairness and a level playing field that we have to do, as this book is saying, receive the instruction of wisdom, receive the instruction of justice, of judgment, of equity, to give subtlety to the simple. Here we kind of get into some categories of the audience. Subtlety to the simple. I would say that that's a young person, maybe young in the faith. Being called simple is a negative connotation, but I kind of like things simple. I have to keep things simple for myself sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with, do what?
My version says prudence.
Prudence, or yeah. So give subtlety to the simple, someone who just thinks plainly, a very straightforward way of looking at things. To the young man, knowledge and discretion. So to the subtlety give subtlety rather to the simple. So simple people, basic kind of entry level way of thinking, give subtlety to them. It's beneficial to them in some way, you know what I'm saying. To the young man, meaning maybe they're a little older, maybe they'll have a little more experience with whatever, to that person, knowledge and discretion. It's kind of another level of what to do with the information. So you have subtlety, you have knowledge and discretion. So there's a lot of kids that don't have a lot of knowledge. Some of them don't exercise very good discretion with that knowledge, but this is going to be there to help them. To a wise man, or it says a wise man will hear and will increase learning. Even a wise person can gain and benefit from the Proverbs. So the simple can benefit, the young, the developing can benefit. A wise will hear and increase in learning. And even a man of understanding, that's someone who's been around the block quite a few dozen times, and they have a lot of the wisdom already. And they even understand a lot of the things that we should be learning in life, shall attain unto wise counsels. Just taking it up another level. The word counsel, I think, was used when we're talking about wisdom. There's always going to be rooms and tiers of levels of this for us to grow and to gain from. So, in here we have a wide spectrum of ages, but we can all gain something equally on our own level from studying the Proverbs, and that's kind of what it's telling us. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. What is that word dark? Y'all got to know the word in your versions?
I says they're riddles.
Riddles. They're mysteries is another way of looking at it. The things that are hard to understand. That this book is going to give us the tools we need to look through the mysteries or the dark things or the things that are hard to get a hold of and make sense of them. So that's kind of an opening thought into chapter 1. Verse 7 kind of gives us the key to the whole thing. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Elsewhere we'll read again where it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the whole key. So what does that mean? The fear of the Lord. Someone asked, do what?
Reverence.
Okay, reverence, that's the textbook definition for what it says. I believe it might go a little beyond that. So when we revere something, when we're showing reverence, what does that look like?
Whatever it says we're going to do.
It's
Okay.
something that's very important to us.
Okay.
Important enough that I'm not sure this, we try very hard not to look away from that thing or person or knowledge.
Okay.
And acknowledgement of reverences, acknowledgement of.
And why? Kind of is the question. I think that to get to the true depths of the meaning of this word fear is why do we do these things?
Because he's over us. He's all
Okay. Because God is in control of it all, right? It's not just, oh, he's God, so I'm going to respect him. It's, oh, he's God. He can do whatever he wants to do here, and he's going to keep his promises, but, we got to not only respect him, but fear him on a healthy level. It's hard to understand for some people, hard to explain too, but I wrote it in a book one time. I was talking to one of my high school kids, and he was doing a paper on the fear of the Lord in the public high school, which I thought was cool. And he said, what does this really mean? Because he knew I was, in ministry and stuff. And God gave it to me, I guess. It's on the spur of the moment. I said, well, because I knew he was into cars. I said it was kind of like this. It was like if you're standing at the open hood of a NASCAR and you got an engine sitting there running, revving up to 8,000 RPM, are you going to be scared?
Yes.
He was like, some people wouldn't be, right?
8,000, it's getting on up there.
Yeah, and that thing's going wide open, red lining, and that, you're looking
Just
at.
one tiny slip and you're
Duh.
That's the thing. I said, are you gonna be scared to stand there and look at that engine? He said, and he thought for a second, he's like, well, I don't guess so, but, I was like, exactly. What does that but mean? He's like, well, I know if I make one wrong move or put my hand in there, it's done. And it's gonna tear me up and possibly kill me. It's like, that's what the fear of the Lord is. You're not scared of it, but you're so respectful of its potential authority over your life that you're going to do what you're supposed to do when you're around it. You're not going to slip up and fall into that motor because you know what's going to happen to you if you do. And you don't want to fall into the hands of an angry God by stepping outside of his will or rejecting him altogether. That's what the fear of the Lord is all about. He's like, that makes a lot of sense. He wrote his paper, I guess he did well on it. But that's what truly the fear of the Lord is. It's more than revering. It's more than respect. It's just knowing the sobriety of that moment of who God is versus who you are, and knowing his authority over your life, not only just now, but in the life to come. I mean, we're putting a lot of trust in God.
You don't have an option if you want to keep breathing.
That's right. I
He
mean,
puts the oxygen in the air, but
yeah, I mean, he controls everything.
Well, knowing the consequences.
And knowing the consequences of it. Excuse me. That is truly what the fear of the Lord is all about. And having that kind of mindset, which very few people have today, especially young people. They just don't have that. Why do you think that is? I mean, you guys are the audience I'm talking about in middle school and high school. Why do your friends don't have that mindset?
Specifically,
Yeah.
I mean, for one, it's not taught at school.
Okay.
Anything like, atheism, stuff like that is taught. They don't have any, understanding of what's right or wrong.
Okay. It's
And
not
this could be
taught.
right one day, this could be wrong the next.
Right.
So they don't have any guidance.
Right or wrong is subjective.
And since they don't believe in a God because of atheism being taught so drastically in school, then they don't understand it.
They just have no concept, and it's not being taught at home. It's not taught in schools anymore.
Social media.
Social media, that is it's almost a religion within itself. And that's where they're getting their morals from. That's where they're getting their wisdom from. And that's why we're seeing so much chaos in the world.
It didn't start with them.
Right,
They've been taught that by
absolutely.
us. I mean, when you were talking about that
Right,
in the beginning, it took me back to when I was working in 1962. Yeah, I started work for the regional office of State Farm in Jacksonville, Florida. And that's when they started big time into computers.
mm-hmm,
And I was thinking I'm looking at this, which is a computer.
right.
But I remember they had a whole room
Oh,
that
absolutely.
was maybe 3 or 4 times as big as this room.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to house the computer system.
yeah.
And then I think now,
Yeah, we got it right here.
or.
Yeah.
Oh, that's way smarter than that was back in
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I forget
System.
I forget the percentage, but they say there's X amount of more power in this than there was to take the shuttle to the moon.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous of how much power we have sitting in that
Much faster.
and how much faster and all that good stuff. But yeah, things are changing constantly, and with that, we have people just accepting so many other explanations other than God, and we're leaving God out, and we can't even get to the beginning point of knowledge or the beginning point of wisdom because we no longer overall have a fear of the Lord. I see that in our government, I see that in our schools, I see that in our politics, I see it in some churches. We're just getting away from the fear of the Lord, so we really have no starting point for a lot of people because they're not getting to the starting point of having fear of God to begin with.
And God is not relevant.
Who's not? I mean, he is who we. I think the problem is somewhere along the way we've decided that God is someone or something that we created. That's what atheists say. We created him to make us feel better about dying. Basically, is what atheists say, that we have no other way of dealing with death and the idea of no longer existing. So we just came up with the idea of God so that we make ourselves feel better about it. That's literally what atheists tell us.
I've got too much living to do to worry about dying. It could come this second, but it could come years down the road.
Right.
I have to live now.
Sure.
And I personally can't live without God.
Right, absolutely.
I mean-
And that's their point. They're like, well, you've created this thing to give you purpose to keep on living, and they put everything backwards. You know, God is not something that we created. God is who created us, and we are going to be yielding to His authority in the end. And that's what no one wants to be held accountable to, is the authority of the Bible or the authority of God. So that's why they've thrown it out of the way and they've said this is not true. God is not real. Therefore, we make our own destiny. And that's missing, that's the most unwise thing in the world we can do, knowing us that this is truth, that God is real. And until we get people back to that point, I don't know that we're going to get much farther than we already are. We're probably going to continue to digress as a society, which is probably part of the plan. I mean, the Bible talks about that's kind of the way it's going to go. But
I mean, one weird thing is if God is incomprehensible, even to a human level, how could a human have come up with those thoughts?
exactly, how can we come up with something we can't comprehend? And how can AI teach us about it when we came up with AI? And now it's teaching itself things, but it seems to have somewhat of an understanding of God. So what does that say?
Well,
Yeah.
it told us what God was.
It told us what the Trinity was pretty simply right there in just a few sentences. So that's our starting point for gaining knowledge and even wisdom, is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. That's why we see so many foolish things going on in the world.
I gotta memorize that one. I got a lot of friends that I need to tell.
Absolutely. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. And atheists especially get very, very offended when you start teaching them about God. They just get belligerently offended. They despise what we're trying to teach them. Well, the Bible says they're fools. You know, a textbook definition of a fool is someone who's belligerently unwilling to learn and to receive instruction. They're just defiant about it for whatever reason. Why do you think that reason is? We'll shut it down after this verse, but what do you think that reason is? Why are they so defiant over even having an open conversation about the possibility of God being real and the Bible being true?
Because they don't want to be submissive to God.
Exactly. They don't want
They
to
want
give
to
up.
be God.
They're afraid
Exactly.
they're afraid it's true. And they don't want to be proven wrong because then they have to face the truth. That's what I think. Yeah, they don't want to be submissive. They don't want to yield to its authority.
God-
Devil's involved.
I'm sure the devil's
Oh,
highly
absolutely.
involved in that. I mean, he was so mad, the way I kind of see it, he was so mad about getting kicked out of heaven, he went after Adam and Eve. He's like, I'm not going to give them a chance that I don't have anymore. I'm going to go get them to buy into the same lies I told myself,
Don't have company.
so I'll have some company. Exactly.
Think how young Adam and Eve were. They hadn't been in existence that long.
Right.
And
They had not built up.
wisdom.
Huh?
They're wisdom that we're talking about.
That's right. And they
Lived
had-
experience.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
had not built up that experience to be wiser
Right.
and to say, because God gave us free will.
Sure. Yeah. That's the whole point.
Boy, you know, I know he does not make a mistake. But there have been times I've.
But you wondered if we should have had that free will. But if we didn't have the free will, we could have never chosen Christ.
I know.
So it's
Or if he'd
a catch
explained,
22.
hey, there is an evil adversary out here and he's trying to trick you and subvert you.
Right.
So watch out for him, but they didn't get
I
that.
think that was the point though.
Yeah.
Was
To
you
see
have the
what they
tree
were
of
gonna
life
do.
and you have the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the reason they were both there and that they had no knowledge is so that they'd either lean on their own understanding or God's understanding.
Right.
So by choosing the knowledge of good and evil, they leaned on their own understanding instead of
Right.
God's.
God left it up to them. And that's another piece.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
It really is.
That's another piece of our culture today I see that's failing miserably is students' ability to make a decision without being told what to do.
Mhm.
You know, they've been so guided for so long to the right answer that they can't find the right answer without someone steering them to the right answer. But God didn't want to do that with us. He wanted us to 100% choose Him of our own will, of our own decision, and He didn't want to interfere with that, so He didn't.
That's true in one light, but in another light, kids are running the house.
They are.
Well, and that too. On top of all that, the kids are definitely running the show in this day and time, sadly. All right, well, we'll close that down. We didn't get too far today, but I think we got enough into it that we kind of see where this is going. So we'll pick up with verse 8 next week, guys, and we'll see you all then.